I'm always so tempted to
Alrighty.
hit the leave
So,
button.
welcome to our second workshop tonight. We're going to be doing web development, but in Python. So this is going to be kind of new, and it's also going to be kind of fun. So let's dive in. We're going to start actually by looking at something that you can build with Flask. Pop this open. This is my first ever web app. It's very simple. We have a home page. We have a calendar page. So if we hop over to this calendar page, I don't know why it's not letting me do it. There we go. Here's what we got lined up. And this actually just went and fetched Enlight's Google Calendar and pulled the next 10 events. And all of these events are actually taking place tomorrow. So we actually have a pretty stacked day. And so how is this even possible? How are we able to go to a website and have it, dynamically retrieve information for us? If you went to your personal website that you made for your first project in this cohort, you'd always see the same thing every time you went to, in my case, maxandgeller.com. It always shows you the same thing. But this isn't just a website. This is something called a web app. And web apps allow you to kind of retrieve this information dynamically so that depending on who's looking at it or when you're looking at it, it shows different things to different users. Let's pop back into our slide deck. I'm going to give you another quick high-level overview. Web app versus website. So websites are static. The information is always the same and you don't really interact with it. In more technical speak, there's no backend to it. Web apps, however, as I kind of just demonstrated, they do have a backend. In the case of our demonstration, our backend script went and fetched the next 10 events on my Google Calendar and just spit them out right there. So we're going to be learning about how to set up this web app and leave you with the foundation to kind of start working with your own API, since you kind of already know how to do that. So getting started with Flask, we have a couple options here. If you want to run this in VS Code or Atom or your favorite text editor IDE, you're going to want to pip install Flask, and that also assumes that you have Python installed. But I'm going to be, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to be using Replit. And if you guys want to follow along in Replit, we don't need to do this step. That's about it. Let's get started. So we're going to pop open a REPL and create a new one. Maybe, please. Python, Flask, tutorial 1. So everybody's here. Can I get some thumbs up, like reacts or just this, if you're all created a new REPL before we get going? All right, I see Oliver's good. I see Erica's great. Jenna's good. Megan's good. Liv, we good? Liv is good. And Varun, he seems to be struggling. I don't know. He's not giving me a thumbs up. I don't think he's got it. There we go. All right. So we're in our REPL, and we're going to be setting up our main.py file. The first thing we're going to do actually is just import Flask. And we're going to do this by saying, can I type? Yes. From Flask, import capital F Flask. And all this is really doing, it's importing the Flask function from the Flask library. And the good thing about Replit is that we don't actually need to install this library, because when we run this code, it's going to install it for us, which is really sweet. But you wouldn't be able to do it this simply in on your own local machine. So now that we have our Flask library imported, we're going to create a variable for our actual application. So we're going to say app equals, put some spacing, Flask. Wow, that was not Flask. Flask. And then we're going to put something called a dunder method, double underscore, which I like to shorten to dunder. So we're going to put Flask dunder name. And the reason we do this is because we're going to skip down a few lines and create this if statement. If dunder name is equal to dunder main, put a colon, and then it gives me the indent. We want the app to run. So let's talk about what this means before I fill in the parentheses. Basically what we're saying is that we only want our application to run if the script that's being run happens. Sorry, I see we have a question. Why do we need the from Flask? What's the difference between that and then import Flask as FK? So they're basically the same thing. If you did that, you'd probably just put FK here, or you would put, maybe you might actually put flask.fk. I'm not totally sure about that. So that's just really, you can import things however you want. It's, I can probably change name as, banana. And if I wanted to use that, then I would put banana. That's really what these are just kind of industry standard, like, import names. So to give you some idea, some more context about that. Does that answer your question? Okay, I hope it did. Let's go back to what we were talking about here. Kind of, why do we need the from Flask part though? So it's basically, if we didn't, we would have to say flask.flask. And the reason for that is that in the Flask library, there's a function that's also called Flask. And that function Flask is different from the library named Flask. So I'm specifically saying from the Flask library, I just want to import the function that lets me run a Flask app. And later on, you're going to see we're going to actually import another function that's going to let us render HTML pages. So good, we can move on now. Why are we doing dunder name equals main? So all this really means is that if the Python script originates from the file that it's run as, the app will run. But if I were to import this script into another file and call it from there, it wouldn't run. And this is just practice for running Flask applications. Now, normally in this, if you are running this in your VS Code, you wouldn't need to do, specify anything in here. But because we're running from Replit, I have saved a little code. We want to specify our host and our port. And don't worry, don't stress too much about this. All this is really going to let us do is run a Flask app from Replit. So yeah, let's save us some time here. Now we have our app, we have the conditions for it to run, but we actually wanted to show something, right? Like, we wanted to show something when we run. So we have to create routes. So let's say app.route. This macro just allows us to create routes. And the default route is just a slash. So when you go to any web page, this is kind of the default landing. So at the default, we're going to define a function called home. And for now, let's just have it return. Oh, shoot, Oliver, you're right. I deleted that. Good catch. Thank you for that. So we're going to return whatever we want. In my case, I'm going to put my name is Max. Yay. We're just going to return this simple one-line statement. And that's about it. We can run this. It's going to install the Flask library for us, which is awesome. And voila. We can pop this out in a new tab, and we can see that we actually loaded a page that returned the statement that we put in here. And so we're looking at a website that we generated with Python, not HTML, which is pretty neat, if you ask me. Is everybody good so far? Do we have, hopefully you didn't put my name is Max. Maybe you put something else. There are no other Maxes in here that I know of. If anybody's struggling, please unmute or drop something in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to keep going.
It said my package operation failed. So I think I copied everything correctly.
Okay. That's a good question. I've never seen that error before. To be honest, I would Google it. I would say replit package error failed or whatever, package installation failed or whatever error you got. I would literally copy paste that. But to be honest with you, I do not know what would cause that. Because typically if you just create from Flask, import Flask, I would make sure it's case sensitive, exactly how it is here.
Yeah, everything seems to be the same, but I'll look it up.
Okay. I'm gonna, just in case, if you can't follow for some reason, you can join my Replit and you can follow along with that one.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
So,
I think I'll just do that.
So anybody else who's struggling, they can feel free to do that too. And when you start editing it, it's going to create your own copy of it too, which is kind of cool.
Okay.
So now let's make our first page, right? How are we going to do that? Let's create another page. How do you guys think, if I wanted to create another page, what would I type here? I would take a look at how we created the home page and go from there. What do you think I should start with?
The same at app.route.
Yep, you're right on it. Hang on. I see something popped up in the chat. Yep, Oliver's got it. App.route. And then I'm going to call this page /about. and then we'll create a new function, define about, and this will return, I don't know, something else. I don't care. And if we stop, we rerun it, and if we went to slash about, look at that, something else popped up. So we have 2 of these pages so far, but we can only navigate to them by like using the address bar, and they also don't show anything of like real use to us. So what we actually want to do is going to be create HTML pages. And if we want to create HTML pages, Eric, are you raising your hand or? You're good, you're good. So as I was saying, if we want to create HTML pages that actually render rather than just strings of text, we're going to have to create a folder, and we're going to call it templates. So click that folder icon and call it templates. And it's pretty important that you call it templates because Flask looks for this folder to contain all the HTML documents that you want to use. So to start, we're going to add a file to this folder, and I'm just going to call it template.html. And so now that we have a template HTML document, this document is going to be one that actually allows us to do everything from, allows us to render all our pages using a similar template. So if you look at my demo, this header, it stays the same because it comes from the template. So we're going to do something similar here. I'm going to start with a little bit of boilerplate HTML code, and I'll just drop it in the chat for people to copy over as well. So let's start moving this stuff over. And once I have it moved over, I will let everybody else copy. I will just drop it in the chat for everybody else to copy too. Actually H1. Hello world. Flask. And I'm just going off the top of my head here. And then what we want to do after that, we're going to want to do this stuff too, which I will, and don't worry, I'm going to go through everything that's going on here. Now that we have all this fun stuff, I'm going to just copy paste it in the chat. And I'm also going to make sure that this runs. Oh, it probably won't run yet, actually, now that I think about it. But let's talk about a bit about what's going on. So this template.html is going to serve as kind of like the launching point for all of our pages, our 2 pages in this case. We have a very basic head, and you'll notice that the style sheet link, it looks a little bit different. We're using double brackets, and it's referring to folders static, CSS, template.css. These folders don't exist yet, but don't worry, we're going to make them. And then you have some H1 and a P tag, and then you have these handlebar style curly brackets, and where it says block content and end block, that's where the actual HTML of a page is going to be going into. And we'll see a little bit more what that looks like. So now let's create a new page. We're going to create another file in our templates folder, and let's call this one home.html. And inside it, we're going to copy and paste, and here's this stuff for you as well. This is just very simple. We can talk about what's going on here. Again, the same boilerplate head, and then in the body, you can see that it extends the template.html file that we created, and instead of having, block content end block with nothing in between, this content that's between block and end block is everything that's going on. So I'm just going to put welcome for now. That's fine. And now if we run this again, we can see that it still hasn't changed yet. We actually need to tell our backend script, main.py, that we want to render this template that we're using. So in order to do that, we're going to import another function called render_template. And when we do that, we can actually put these templates in the return statement. So now we want to return render_template, and we're going to put home.html. And so now what we're doing is that we're saying at the home route, at the default slash, render the template found at home.html. And this should look at template.html, put this fun stuff in, and then put the home where it extends it. So let's run it. Look at that. So we have, you know, hello world from Flask. So this stuff exists on every single page now. And then this second part, welcome, that only exists on the home page. You know, if I put you are home. Like that. How are we doing so far? Do I need to slow down? You guys want me to show something again?
Mine says internal server error.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
But it was working before this, like when I ran it last.
Did you run this? Did you put in this import and you did this?
Let me double check. In Python, under template. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And inside your, you extended the template, and I mean, I just pasted the home template, the home stuff in the Zoom chat.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Wait, can you go back to your main.py?
What's that?
Can you go
Main.py?
back to main.py?
Yeah.
It's just home.html in parentheses, right?
Yes. Well, it's going to be whatever you called your home file. Maybe you called it something else. In my case, it's home.html. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have everything.
Okay. Then let me grab you my link again. Maybe sometimes, honestly, you might just have to refresh the page. Replit can get buggy sometimes, so sometimes you just refresh and try it again. It'll work. But if not, my Replit link is there, so you can follow along with that.
Okay, sweet.
So we have a home page. We have a template that everything renders from, which is pretty cool, you know? So let's, maybe we can make this more accurate, you know? Welcome to our first web app.
Hey, Max. You want to maybe paste the Python in chat as well?
Yeah, we'll do.
Sweet.
And, you know, put in paragraph tag, rename this with, better yet, actually, something else that would be really helpful to do for us is to put navigators in, like, into our template file. So if we create a, we can start with just a link with href to, in quotes, we're going to put double brackets and the function URL _4, and then we want to put the name of the page that we want. So in our case, it's going to be home is one of the pages we have. Close that parenthesis, put a space, more double brackets, and then we can close that. We can call this home and close the A tag. And if we just copy paste this again, we can also put the URL for about, and we can call that about. And this goes up, and since this is in the template, now we can go to home and we can go to about. Now, we don't actually have an about page yet, so we can't access the template. But now we have href links that can let us bounce between different pages in our web app. I'll put that format here in the chat for you guys as well. Yeah, almost done here. Let's actually make our about page. So let's add a file. We're gonna call this about.html. And we're just gonna copy paste the stuff from home again, because a lot of it's just boilerplate HTML stuff. And now we can say, welcome, you are at the about page. And the last thing we need to do before we can run this is go back to our main.py and return we're gonna want to render the template at about.html. And so if I stop, if I rerun this app, great. We can jump between home and about. You can see, welcome, you are home. Welcome, you're at the about page. And we can go back and forth. And so now we have our own little web app that we wrote the backend for in Python. We tell it which template to render when. And it's hosted, you know, in this case, it's hosted locally with, it's hosted not locally, excuse me, it's hosted with Replit. And we have these 3 template files that kind of give us the makeup of our page. The last thing we're going to do is talk about style sheets. But before that, does anybody have questions?
I guess not a question, but just like a clarification, because the template, I guess, provides a header for every page that you create. Is that just going to be there all the time?
Yes. So the reason it does that is because if you look at home and about, the first thing we do in these brackets is say that it extends template.html. And so that just means that, you know, we want to use template.html in these pages. And we specified that we want to use, we specified the location of where we put the template by using these block content end block. So that kind of determines where, that means that any page that we render will technically fit in between where we start and end the block. So if we moved it elsewhere inside the body, you couldn't put it in the head, but if we moved it elsewhere in the body, you could have it interrupt other things. And you can mess around with that and see how that looks. So last thing we're going to do, like I mentioned, I'm going to create a new folder now for our style. So we're going to put this in a folder. Oh, nope, that's not how I wanted it. I want it in the outside. So we're going to create a new folder called static. And inside the static folder, we're going to create another folder called CSS. Oh, it's loading. That's not good. What happened here? Okay. Oh, lovely. Let's try this again. As I was saying, we're going to create a static folder. And inside the static folder, we're going to create a CSS folder. And then inside the CSS folder, we're going to create a file called template.css. And the reason we do all this is because that's just how Flask actually looks for things. Like that's how it looks. That's what it looks for. It finds your style sheet inside the static folder, inside the CSS folder, which is inside of the static folder. That's where it looks for CSS files. So I'm gonna save us some time with adding CSS. I'm gonna import a style that I've used. I'm pretty bad with CSS, to be honest. So here, I mean, I'll paste this in for you guys if you just want to have a little bit of style. But I mean, we load this up and we can see, okay, you know, we got something. We can look at it a little bit larger. We have a background page. We have a default font. We have, you know, a little bit of a navigation bar going on here, which is pretty cool too. But yeah, now we have a web app that, you know, you can run with this however you want. You know, this isn't just a static website. You can fetch data from Google Calendar. You can fetch, you know, weather data. I don't know, maybe you want to maybe you're hosting your to-do list somewhere and you want to put your upcoming to-dos on your web app. It doesn't really matter. You can really do whatever you'd like. And to take this a step further, you can actually do something kind of what I did with my demo. And I deployed it using something called Google App Engine, but there are tons of other ways to do it. Heroku is another really popular way. And that will allow you, it'll create a URL for you that will allow you to access your application that you created. But yeah, I mean, at this point now, you know, we have a backend set up with Python, and whatever scripts you want to run, you could put it in here. And that's pretty much, you know, how it would, you know what to look for. But that's pretty much, we've got a working web app here. You know, what you do with it now is really up to you.
So you don't need JavaScript to like go between the tabs? Because I thought that's how you interact with the website.
Not in this case. What we did here is if we go back to our templates, we go to our template, we use the, you know, the A tag, the link tags in HTML. And for Flask, the syntax to navigate between different pages, you put double brackets, double curly brackets, and then there's this function that gets imported with Flask, URL_for. And in my case, since it's home.html, I put home, and for about, it's about.html, so I put about.
So using that link, you can just go between the tabs.
Yeah, look, because I can just click between here and I can see the different content, right, that I put in myself.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't able to get the styling. Do I need to link each page or just the template? You should be able to do this in just the template. You just have to make sure this spacing is really weird. I would take a look at how it's done. In your link to your style sheet, the href goes URL for static, and then a space, and then you specify the file name where you go into the CSS folder first, and then template.css. And if you do this in just your template file, you should be good to go.
Also, I literally copied and pasted everything that you were writing, and my replit said package operation failed. Like, it kept saying that. So
Really?
should I just like go back and try it again later?
I would honestly did you try like refreshing the page or like closing out of the tab and reopening it?
I didn't do that. I just tried refreshing.
I would honestly just close it and open it up again. Your replit should be saved. It gets saved automatically, but it can get finicky sometimes.
I'm doing that right now.
Ah, there we go. Found the error. Yeah, so if you want to have the lowercase CSS folder so that you're you know what to look for. But yeah.
Mine's saying now we couldn't reach your REPL.
Oh,
Which
it had the same error that I had before, the pop-up?
Yeah, I think so. It's saying make sure like it has a port open, is ready to receive traffic.
Oh, I would make sure that in your main.py that you specify host and port.
Host and port.
And these are defaults that work with Replit. If you did this in like, if you're working in VS Code, for example, I wouldn't include any of this at all. It would, if you're working not on Replit, just have it run like this. Maybe you can specify debug equals true. That's kind of helpful. And it will default to run on port 5000 of your computer. But if you're running this in Replit, keep it like this.
Wait, what'd you say to change if we use VS Code?
You don't want to pass anything into app.run. You can, but you don't have to. And something helpful to specify would be debug equals true, and that does exactly what it tells you it will. If the app crashes, it'll tell you why.